Awesome. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for having me at DevDays. I was actually looking at the speaker list, and I see all these awesome people, and then I see my name pop up. And I really don't know what I'm doing here, so, so I brought candy to bribe everyone to not say my presentation sucks. This is Swedish salty licorice. Most people outside of Sweden don't enjoy it. And this is Swedish bilar, which means cars in Swedish, right? And these are a lot tastier. So I'm going to throw some out in every row and open up the bags and share them with everyone so that everybody can have a taste. I'm going to try not to hit the tech department over here. All right. So now you're bribed. Now you're bribed and sugar rushed. So when we got picked up from the airport yesterday, we were sitting in a cab on the way to the hotel, and Seb said that, you know, every conference should have like a talk in the middle, which is not technical. Just something else that snaps you out of it, brings your mind to think about something else. And you might have read the abstract of my talk, and it seems quite technical. That's because I was lying to you. Otherwise, I wouldn't get accepted to conferences. So I want to just see the demographic of my crowd. If everyone that knows one programming language, at least one programming language, please raise your hands. Wow, great. Everybody writes code. Keep your hands up. Keep your hands up. So everybody that just knows one programming language, please take your hands down. Everyone that just knows two programming languages, take your hands down. 3, take your hands down. 4, 5. All right, I see I have some problem people in the crowd. There's some extra candy in it for you if you don't give me any hard questions. So I made this talk geared towards mainstream object-oriented programmers. And what I mean by that is I mean C#, Java, VBNet, C++ developers, right? All the code samples are in C# because I'm a C# kind of guy. I'm going to start this off with an example from a movie. Because before I do talks, I always have angst. I really feel like, oh, damn, everything is so hard and the world's so awful. And what I do when I have angst is I take a cup of hot cocoa and curl up under a blanket and watch really, really bad movies. One of them is Crocodile Dundee 2. And there's a scene in Crocodile Dundee 2 where Mick Dundee, Crocodile Dundee, walks around with his son in Hollywood or California or somewhere. And there's this guy sitting under a tree. And he's doing something. He's sitting there. It's a big guy. For you know who've seen the movie, you know it's Mike Tyson, right? So there's a big, scary guy sitting under a... Yeah. Great. Thank you. So there's a big, scary guy sitting under a tree. And Mick Dundee's son, he asks him, Dad, what's that man doing? And Mick goes like, oh, I don't know, son. Let's go ask him. So they walk up to Mike Tyson sitting there and ask him, like, what are you doing? And he says, oh, I'm meditating. Let me show you. And he shows them, you know, how to meditate. He teaches them something new, and they go away one experience richer. So they talk to a stranger. They learn something. So obviously, just based on this movie, we should be doing this more. You could argue it was fearless and stupid, and it could get beaten up because you just don't go up to big guys in parks and randomly talk to them. But they weren't. So why do we have this notion of that it's not okay to speak to strangers? And I know I'm in Poland, I'm Polish, and I speak Polish, and I know this whole respect your parents kind of thing, but I'm actually going to go out on a limb here and blame our parents. Because our moms told us, you know, you're not supposed to talk to strangers, or dads told us you're not supposed to talk to strangers, and you're definitely not supposed to accept candy from strangers. See you all there eating candy, right? Yeah. But I mean, our parents didn't do this to be mean. There's a reason behind why our parents acted the way they did when we were kids. And that is because they know something we don't know, or maybe they just knew it instinctively. And what they knew is that when you're born as a child, you're really a novice at social interaction. You don't know how to interact with people. And if we take that and we apply it to the Dreyfus skill acquisition model, I'm sure you've all seen this model because it's always in all talks and all slideshows, but I'm going to go through it really quickly. So if you're a novice, you need strict guidelines and rules that you can adhere to, right? Like, do not talk to strangers, do not accept candy from strangers, it's a bad idea. But then you move up the model and you become an advanced beginner and you start having some limited situational awareness or perception, and you can start thinking about things. Then you become competent, you can deal with crowdedness, and so forth and so forth. Until you become an expert. Then you intuitively know stuff about what's good and bad. You can grasp situation and you can understand the depth of it. So I'm going to go out on a second limb here and say that even though we're all developers, I think we're kind of experts at social interactions. So we're no longer novices, so we really don't have any excuse not to talk to strangers. Now, one of my big hobbies is traveling. When I don't code, I travel. I always try to take 1 or 2 months in the summer to go somewhere, visit a different culture, visit different people. One of my favorite places to go is Cambodia. This is me in Cambodia. Yeah, it's short beard and much younger and much more good looking. I don't know what happened. The thing with Cambodia is it's a kind of odd place because the people have a really, really horrific history, but they're really, really open. They like to talk about themselves, they like to talk about their country, like to talk about their culture, and they're really, really good at English. So spending 1 month in Cambodia, it messes with your mind. You start thinking it's okay to walk up to people and talk to them in the street. That's not acceptable behavior in Sweden. And I know some Polish culture, so I know it's probably not acceptable behavior in Poland either. Just don't walk up to random people and start talking to them. But when I came home from Cambodia, I was in this mindset. I was in this mindset of, you know, it's fine for me to randomly go up and talk to people. And I'm all jet lagged and stuff. It's first day of work. I was taking the bus to work. It's a 30-minute bus ride. I go out, I sit on the bus, and there's this man sitting there, and I chat him up, and I'm like, yeah, so what you doing, blah, 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 and he answers, and we have a nice chat, and the man's from Senegal, and he tells me all kind of interesting things, and I go into work, I do my 8 hours, I go out, sit on a bus back home, and I try to do the same thing once again. And there's this Swedish old lady, and I ask her, you know, oh, so where are you going? Where have you been? You know, just random questions. Nothing harmful. And she just looks at me, you know, because in Sweden, if you randomly go up to talk to people, you're like a drug addict, or you want something from them, or you want to hurt them, or I don't know, you want to push something on them. You know, it's not that you're nice or you want to learn something. And so I've been going on a rant here about, you know, just social aspects of talking to strangers, and what does this have to do with software development? How does this even relate to code, right? So in 2011, I'm sorry. In 2011, I went to Heroku because one of my guilty little pleasures, even though I do .NET for a living, and most programs I write for my clients are .NET. My guilty little pleasure is Ruby. I've never gotten paid for writing Ruby. I just do it because, yeah, it's fun. So I went to Heroku in 2011 and just to hang out with the Ruby community and meet some strangers. And I was walking around there, and people were asking, like, oh yeah, so I was having a Treton 37, this is the company I work at. Traton 37 means 1337 in English, by the way, if you were wondering. And they were like, yeah, so what do you guys do, you know, because I was walking around with a t-shirt. I'm like, yeah, so we do .NET development with agile and lean approaches, blah, blah, blah. I did a whole elevator pitch. And most of the people were they just grabbed my shoulder and looked me in the eyes and like, I'm sorry, man. I'm like, what? What just happened there? What just happened there? The thing is that I started asking them, why are you sorry? Yeah, because you need to write .NET all the time. I'm like, well, why are you sorry for me? C# is an awesome language. I actually like C#. And I started investigating it because I couldn't just, you know, let it be. I had to investigate this. So I started asking them, what's so bad about C#? What is it you don't like? And they started coming up with all these like fake arguments for when I don't know what to call it, like Microsoft is bad, it's evil, blah blah blah, it's locked in, you can only use it on Windows, blah blah blah. And I was like, yeah. The problem here is that these people don't even understand what they're criticizing. So I decided to go in and educate them. I was like, oh yeah, so this is C#, this is IL, this is CLR, this is Mono, this is how it works, this is stuff you can do with it, this is how you can run open source stuff on it. And it completely blew their mind. They didn't know this stuff existed. And I mean, I've seen this behavior on and on again. I mean, you go to front-end user groups and they're like, PHP developers, I need to hate PHP. And everybody's hating on somebody else. And they don't really understand what they're hating at. I mean, I saw TypeScript on Twitter. It's like awesome debate. Like everybody's like, I hate TypeScript. Somebody asked me yesterday, what do you think about TypeScript? I haven't looked into it. I can't say. I've just like seen some code samples. I can't, based on this, tell you what I think about it. So what we're talking about here is something called xenophobia. Xeno is the Greek word for stranger, and phobia is a phobia. So we're actually afraid of strangers. And this is very natural behavior, because it's built into us to divide us into groups, like us and them groups, right? So in the us group, that's the in group. That's the one we belong to. The them group, that's the other group. Those are the bad guys. And whatever they do, it doesn't really matter. We're just going to hate on them. So that's a form of segregation. And because in order to hate on some other group, you need to have familiars. So you need to associate with an in-group to have an out-group. You know who else did that? Hitler did that. Because what you're actually doing is you're building a social identity, a culture, and it's kind of an autocracy where you say these are the given rules and sets of things that are acceptable in our culture, and all else we're just going to hate. And there's an experiment done by a guy called Ron Jones in California. He was a high school teacher, I think. He did it in '67. It's a social psychological experiment called the Third Wave, where he was trying to explain fascism to his class in high school. And he went about it by actually implementing an autocracy in 5 days. Or he did it like in 3. And on the 4th day, they had to cut the experiment short because it started getting really scary. Kids not in his class started associating with this group, and they really started doing like bad things to the outside kids. And there's a movie based on this, if you can watch, if you don't want to read all the research. It's really interesting. So there's a name for this. It's called social identity theory. And as I said before, it's all based on the notion of an in-group and an out-group. And we will always automatically associate ourselves with the in-group, and we will automatically try to push the out-group away. And the scary thing about this is that we are not willing to admit our bias or phobia. If I ask you, don't you like PHP developers? No, I don't have anything against PHP developers. It's, it's just a thing that, you're going to have some explanation. Because we try to rationalize this. We try to rationalize this behind common sense and logical explanations, but really there is very seldom any logic behind it. The good thing about this is that research shows that if you do what I'm doing to you now, making you aware of this bias or phobia, you can start working to combat that, to go to the next level. But my personal opinion is that we will actually always discriminate towards something, because that's just how we're built. So it's just up to us to set the border for our discrimination, And I would much rather us be inclusive, and it's like, yeah, we're just like this developer group or whatever, this software interest group, and we can share experiences together. It's basic tolerance, right? Next time you talk to someone, you go and you just don't try to argue over position. Don't try to go like, oh, mine's bigger than yours, or this one's better than that one, or whatever. Try to say, oh yeah, so these are the things we agree on, right? And these are the things we disagree on. Oh, that's cool. This is what my language does. Can you show me what your language does? That's a much more creative discussion. So don't criticize, don't condemn, don't complain. There's 2 great books you can read if you're interested in these things. And the one is How to Win Friends and Influence People. It sounds very snake oily, but it's an awesome book. And the other one is Getting to Yes, which is actually a book about handling conflicts, or well, basically getting to yes. Negotiations, a book about negotiation. So you're sitting all there and like say, yeah, whatever. Why should I care? This is all interesting and fun stuff. You just told us some random facts. Why should you care? This is Honey Badger. He's badass. He doesn't care about anything. Well, the thing is that how many in here are C# developers? All right. The rest of you, what are you, like Java, C++, mainstream? Yeah, so you all have some contact with these languages, right? And the thing is that these languages are multi-paradigm languages. For instance, C# is object-oriented, structured, it's functional, imperative, event-driven. It has all these paradigms in it. But what we were taught in school was OO. We're taught to solve problems the OO way, right? And that's still how we think. And like C++11 is getting lambdas and all that cool stuff, and that's going to be interesting to see what we can do with that. And also, if you look at like C#, Microsoft is spitting out new versions really, really quickly, and they're introducing new paradigms into the language. And there's no possible way we can keep up with the tempo of learning this, and when the release comes, we try to learn it, and then we need to get ahead of the curve. So basically, I go into teams, and I often see this happening. We have all these great tools, all these things we can do, and we're just solving everything with mainstream object-oriented programming. That's the only solution. We just have this one hammer. We keep banging everything in with it. So I think if we try to learn some other concepts, be inspired by some other languages, we could probably utilize our primary tools better. So I'm going to show you some really, really, really basic and trivial samples of other languages and how that's affected my thinking and my C# work, right? And I could do more complex examples, but then this would be a completely different talk. So first up is my little love language, Ruby. I love Ruby. I mean, Ruby is a dynamic language. It's object-oriented. It's like really object-oriented. It was designed in '95 by Yasuhiro Matsumoto, also known as Mats. I actually met Mats at Heroku when I was there. And this is a quote from Mats. This is a quote from Mats about how he was thinking about JavaScript. Look at it. It's awesome. I hope to see... I said JavaScript. I meant Ruby. I hope to see Ruby help every programmer in the world be productive and to enjoy programming and to be happy. That is the primary purpose of Ruby language. How cool is it not to have a language that wants to make you happy? I want to be happy. But one of the first things I noticed in Ruby is also one of the first things people complain about, and it's the block syntax. This is block syntax in Ruby. So I'm going to try to tell you what's going on here. So basically, get is a method, and it takes 2 parameters, basically. So 1 string parameter and 1 block. And blocks are a bit special, so I'm not going to go into exactly how blocks work in Ruby. You can look that up if you're interested. And this can also be written in another way. Oh, there's some other Ruby magic going on here. So name is coming in as a variable, and I'm using string interpolation here, and Ruby has implicit returns. So the last statement is going to be the return statement. So this is the string is actually going to be what's returned from here. So I could write this in a similar fashion, like this, which you usually do in Ruby if you do one-liners. And here I've added in some other cruft, right? I've substituted the do end for squirrely braces, and I've added in parentheses, which are optional in Ruby. And now you see that blocks are actually trailing the method, which is why they're kind of not really arguments, it's just weird. But for you that do C#, now you're starting to see something interesting. I could translate this to C#, right? I could do something like this. That would be cool. And this is an idea I had about 3 years ago. I was like, oh shit, we should do this in C#. This is awesome. And I spiked out like a syntax. The code sample I was showing previously, the Ruby sample, is from Ruby micro MVC framework, or what to call, like, it's really DSL, thank you, for small like web applications. So you basically, it's the path hello and whatever, and that's the request you make to the web application, and yeah, and this is what happens. So this would print out hello world or hello your name in the browser. So I was going into something. Yeah. So we could do that. We should be able to do that with C#. We should be able to do something like this, and basically, this isn't really hard because just to show you that there's no magic going on behind the scenes there. It's just a method called get, and it takes a path and a func, and it's nothing weird. It's just that C# programmers don't write code like this because there's still talks going around about how to use generics. So all this func and action stuff is just really, really weird. And then I started working with a new team, and on that team was a guy called Andreas Håkansson. You might know him as the code junkie. And I started showing him this stuff. I'm like, yeah, so I was thinking we could do something like this and like this and like this, and I even had a name for it. I was like, we could call it Nancy. And I was like, cool, let's do something with this. And he ran away. He was coding and doing spikes and everything, and I was in the middle of doing a company. So I was like, yeah, can't be bothered with open source stuff. One day he goes and he says, like, man, I'm just going to take this from you. Is that fine? Is it okay if I just take? I'm like, yeah, sure, just take it. I'm not even. I hadn't written a single line of code in Nancy. I think if you go really, really far back in the commit history, you can see I committed like a README file. That's like the only thing I did. And Andreas did a talk for us about Nancy. And he said that I have undiagnosed ADD because I pick up something and then I do a little about that and I run away and do something completely different. Maybe should have listened more to Scott this morning to try to stay focused on stuff. So this is actually Nancy syntax. I mean, I cut out all the cruft around with you need to specify up classes and gunk. But this is actually a Nancy thing that will work in C#. So you do greet and your name, and we'll put hello, your name, whatever on screen. Cool. So now we have that. So that's one thing I picked up from Ruby, and I worked with it, and I didn't really know what to do with it, but somebody else did, right? Next language I want to talk to you about is AFL. Now, AFL is an object-oriented language, and I first saw it in 2006 when Bertrand Meyer, the creator of AFL, was presenting on it. And I thought it was interesting. I was like, yeah, so this is cool. And I was big on TDD. I still am big on TDD, but back then TDD was like, ooh, this is the cool thing, and I'd just been doing it for like a couple of years, and I was like, yeah, so we should do something cool with it. And I started talking about Bertrand about, TDD and AFL, and he's like, yeah, we don't need that because, we have other things. We have code contracts. It's like, yeah, so show me this code contract stuff. But I'm getting ahead of myself, I'm sorry. I'm just gonna go like, AFL is actually built on a programming method called the AFL programming method. And that method has principles. There's principles like design by contract, which I mentioned, and command query separation. Yeah, you heard about that one. Uniform access principle, single choice, open close principle from the solid principles. So these are all principles that Bertrand put in there in like '86. And these are things that are all the rage in our community, well, not now, but a couple of years ago. So there are things we could have learned in '86 from AFL, but we're like, yeah, we're not going to look at that. So what I'm going to show you today from AFL is code contracts or design by contract. This is a snippet of some AFL code. There's a lot of things going on that you don't see because I couldn't fit it all on one slide, and I really can't do live coding. This is a set method that takes two integers, one for the hours and one for the minutes. We can assume it belongs to a class called alarm clock, right? And there's some other things in alarm clock which you don't see here. There's a backing field called minutes, which actually holds the minutes that the alarm is set to. And then there's two calculated fields or calculated properties, which are hour and minute. All right? So what's happening here is that we first say what we require from the in data. We say, it won't make sense to have hours that are outside of 0 to 23, right? And it doesn't make sense to have minutes that are outside 0 to 59, because that's just stupid values. It doesn't make sense in this context. And then we actually assign our values to the backing field, and we ensure that the calculated field is actually what the in parameter was, and that's basically it. So what is this useful for, right? I mean, Bertrand talked about, we don't need TDD because we can just put in these contracts, and then we can have automated testing tools, look at the contracts and generate the tests for us. That's kind of interesting. But the important thing is that we tell everyone here what a method expects, what it guarantees, and what it maintains, right? It's basically a contract. So we won't have this stuff leaking all over our code base. I mean, if there's an error in our code, that error is going to be isolated to where it occurs. And I mean, you don't need tooling for this. We should be doing these types of checks anyway. We often don't because we say, I know that there's never going to be a value that's outside my range coming in here because I have full control of the system, and then we have bugs. So this is a really lousy way of doing it. I'm just using if statements and throwing exceptions, and it's all convoluted, but I have to flip the logic around, and it's just not readable. But the cool thing is, and in C# we actually have this. Not a lot of people know it because it's hidden away somewhere in a system diagnostics namespace, and people don't bother to go looking there. It was an MS research project, and it went into .NET 4.0 when it released that. And as I said, we could use this for automated testing. We could use this for generating API documentation. There's all kinds of interesting things we could be doing with it. But I actually I've actually used it for the simple use case which I told you first, which is I want to guarantee that when an error occurs, it occurs isolated in that code, right? So I don't want that bad value spreading and causing some other trouble somewhere else in the system. So when you have like credit card processing code and that kind of code, you kind of want to make sure it's right. The next language I'm going to go into here is Haskell. And here's a disclaimer, right? I've been trying to grok Haskell, and I'm still not kind of there, right? But Haskell is a functional language, and it's a pure functional language. And what that means is that it's pure in a mathematical sense, right? The variables are treated as immutable and all that stuff. But the interesting thing about Haskell is that it was in the 80s when functional languages were all the rage in research. There was all these functional languages popping up all over the place, right? And somebody said, like, all right, we can't be doing this. We need to be focusing our research on one single subject, right, or one single language. And they formed a committee, which actually worked for once, and put all the functional languages there, and I had a lot of really smart people there. And out of that committee came Haskell in 1990, I think. And as I said, there was a lot of people in that committee. And a lot of those people are very influential in the modern languages we use today. Like Simon Peyton-Jones, he works at Microsoft Research, and I bet some of his ideas are finding their way into the Microsoft languages. So this is extremely simple quicksort implementation in Haskell. This is the first thing you're going to see if you go to like Haskell documentation or learning Haskell. This is the example everyone uses. So if you haven't seen Haskell before, what happens here is I have a function called quicksort. It uses pattern matching, says if you pass in an empty list, just return an empty list. If the list actually contains something, split that up into a head and tail. And the head here is called P, it's the pivot, and the tail is X's, it's everything else. And then I go say, yeah, so quicksort everything lesser, and concatenate that with a list only containing the pivot, and concat that with everything which is greater, or union. And then I define what I mean by lesser and greater, and then lesser here is a filter over X's, where the X is less than P. And just to avoid bugs, the greater is a filter over X's, where X is greater than or equal to P, right? And if you look at like a C# implementation of quicksort, it doesn't look like this. I don't know why you would write, unless you're like going on computer science class, why you would write a quicksort, but if you do, you just see it's all convoluted with for loops and everything, and it's not readable, really. So you could write your quicksort like this, right? And this is basically the same thing. I'm saying here, like, if it doesn't contain any elements, just return the empty one, right? I'm taking the pivots, I'm calculating the lesser and taking the greater, and I'm just unioning everything together, right? This is a functional implementation of quicksort in C#. But I mean, this is not practical. You wouldn't really be doing this. But what's interesting about this is that the little Haskell I've dug into and the Haskell community, when I talk to them, they have made my understanding of working with sets of data much better. And I think about sets of data in a different way. And when I process sets of data, I do it differently than I did before. So I'm claiming there's something in Haskell which will improve your coding skill. So go look at Haskell. Next language I want to show you is a language which is really, really cool. And it's so cool because it's so different. And that's Erlang. Now, Erlang was designed by Ericsson to support distributed fault-tolerant and non-stop applications, right? It's designed by a guy called Joe Armstrong in '86, and he open-sourced it in '98, I think. The thing about Erlang is it's really, really heavy on concurrency. It follows something called an actor model, which I'll go into a little bit later, and it uses processes a lot, like really a lot. So this is a piece of this was the simplest thing I could write. It's a basic ping-pong program in Erlang, except it's I'm Wolverine, I'm Sabretooth program in written in Erlang. Or sorry, yeah, written in Erlang. So a couple of concepts, right? We have PID, which is the process ID. We have spawn, which spawns a new process. We have the bang, which is the exclamation mark. That sends a message to a process. And we have receive, which is actually a blocking operation, which waits on the mailbox to get a message. And it gets that message, and then, yeah. So what's going on here, first line, I'm just specifying the module. It's the ping pong module, and then I'm saying what my public exports are, my public functions. The program starts at start, right? And first thing it does is it spawns up a process with the function pong from the module ping pong with no arguments, right? So, and it captures the pong PID in a variable. So if we look at the pong code here, it goes directly to receive, so it hangs. There's nothing in its inbox, so it's just going to sit there and wait. And remember, this is a process, so start continues executing. So next thing is I spawn a new process from the ping pong module with the function ping, and I pass in the pong process ID as a parameter. So now ping starts running. And the first thing ping does is it sends a message to the process ID it received and says Wolverine. And this self thing you see going on, this is for getting my own process ID. I want to know what my process is, right? And it sends that as an argument, or it sends that inside of that message. So now, Pong, it gets a message and it stops and it prints I'm Sabretooth on screen, and it sends a message back Sabretooth to the process, to the ping process. Ping receives Sabretooth. It uses pattern matching here. You see this Sabretooth arrow thingy. It's a pattern matching way to know where to get the different messages. And it says, I'm Wolverine. And then the processes just exit, die. Usually you wouldn't do it like this in Erlang, because what you usually do is you call back, you restart the function after it's executed, so you just keep going in circles, and you have all these small actors all over the place sending these messages to each other. Now, if you think about that for a while, you see you build very modular programs. So, I mean, there's a lot of interesting lessons to be learned from here, but except for saying that it's maybe better at threading and asynchronity and those types of things and grokking, that kind of thinking, I can't really show you any good examples of how this maps to any other language. So, yeah, one more thing. And if you think the syntax is weird in this, I mean, there's Elixir, which is like a Ruby-esque syntax that runs under Erlang VM, which is it's Jose Valim's language, and it's pretty cool. You can take a look at that as well. And also, Microsoft had a project called Axum, which they sacked, Microsoft Research, But the blog post where they sacked the language, they claim that the ideas from Axum are going to go into the other .NET languages. So I'm hoping you're going to see more of this type of stuff. And we already are with Async 08, kind of. So this one was actually not included from the beginning because I mean, I started doing JavaScript in like 96 or 97 or something, I don't know. But I've been going through the 5 stages of denial, right? I've been doing all the bad things, and I've including hiding behind the notion that I'm a back-end programmer and that I don't need to learn JavaScript, right? I did that for many years. Until like 3 years ago, I was like, okay, I finally came to the acceptance stage, and I'm like, all right, I need to suck it up and learn this thing. So JavaScript is a language that comes from Netscape. It's created by Brendan Eich, and Brendan, I don't know if this is hearsay, if it's true, but what I understand, Brendan took the job at Netscape saying that he wanted to build a scheme language, right? And they say, yeah, sure, fine, whatever, do it. And he did. And then he showed it to him, like, yeah, but I mean, could you make it like more Java? And they did. And that's why I've been avoiding JavaScript for so long, to be totally honest. Because they added in squirrely braces, and they called it something with Java. So by just glimpsing at it, I didn't read up on it. I just looked at some code. I was like, yeah, so I can use like all my usual program paradigms here. And it just started coming out crap. But then I saw the talks from Douglas Crockford at Yahoo, and he was telling this story that JavaScript is a scheme-based language, and I was like, oh my god, it's a scheme-based language, it's a Lisp. I've been doing it all wrong all the time. Fuck me. And it's dynamic, it's functional, it's prototype-based, it's awesome language. But the reason I didn't include it here is because it's all the hype, and everybody's talking about JavaScript, and now everybody knows JavaScript. But the thing was, the guy I worked with came up to me with some code, and he was like, I can't understand why my code is not working. It was C# code. And this is a simplification of the problem he was having. Yeah. He's like, I can't figure out why this is, giving me the wrong results. And I just looked at it, and I was like, I've been doing JavaScript for, I was like, it's really, really obvious why this is wrong. You're just doing it all wrong. And what's happening here is that he was expecting the multiplier to be at 10 when the func is returned from the factory. But it's not, because you changed the value of it, right? To JavaScript programmers, this is common day. I mean, this is like, yeah, so what? That's what happens. That's one thing I learned from learning JavaScript. Like, I'm not tripped up by those kind of things in C# anymore. And the other thing I learned from JavaScript is tread very, very, very lightly. There's a lot of hiccups and what the fucks in JavaScript. And you need to navigate around those, and not fall in. And I also recognize that there can be beauty in things that are seemingly ugly from the outside, right? And if you just use them right, it's going to be awesome. So I want to take this back. How am I on time, by the way?
17 minutes.
Yeah, all right. I have plenty of time. There's going to be a lot of time for Q&A in the end. So I want to take this back to where it all started with Ruby, but more importantly with culture. Because I think, I've been showing you code and stuff, and of course you can do coding tricks and architectural tricks and everything you can learn from different languages. But the thing I've learned most is about other things, such as community. Now this is a photo from a Rails conf, and they brought in a marching band with like drums and music and dancers and everything. I've never been to a .NET or Java conference that has done something like that. I usually get a lot of business cards and like stuff at those conferences. It's not, we don't do that stuff in our community. I think that's one thing we could be learning. This is the book I learned Ruby from. This wise, poignant guide to Ruby. It's a beautiful book about two cartoon foxes chasing after chunky bacon and learning and teaching you Ruby in the meanwhile. We don't have those books for .NET or Java. Now, this is a quote from that book. It's about blocks. You know, remember blocks? I like to think of the pipe character as a representation of a tunnel. They give the appearance of a chute that the variables are sliding down. This whole book is written in this sense. And I've used this book to teach people programming that have never programmed their entire life. And it's went really well. There's something else I think we maybe could learn from Rubyists. And it's about naming. Because, you know, when I work with .NET, I get to work with NService, Bus, NUnit, Structure Map, ASP.NET, MVC, reactive extensions. I just by, you know, telling people what technology stack I use, I fall asleep. When I do Ruby projects, I have Factory Girl, Sinatra, Steak, Cucumber, Suspenders, Rails. You know, it's interesting, it's fun. And it's not actually hurting anyone. I know there's people thinking that, you know, if you name your library something silly, it's actually going to hurt some person or kill a kitten or something. I don't see how that's going to happen. But we have this notion, like in .NET and Java, that we need to go around and be like serious and business-minded all the time. I'm very, very serious when it comes to my work. I take my work very seriously, and I take business very seriously. But I don't think that serious needs to equal boring. I think we can still have fun and be very serious and professional about what we're doing. So I think we should be living it up at places where it really doesn't affect the outcome of what we're doing. Like naming, for instance. And this is important. I don't know if you know Portia Tung. She was talking about play as a way of learning and evolving the brain. And there's actually research that shows that playing with things, having fun, it shapes an organism's brain. It makes animals smarter, it makes us more adaptable. It enables us to sustain social relationships, fuels creative thinking and innovation and all that kind of stuff. So what it boils down to here is not really just picking up a new language and learning it. It's about learning a new culture, right? It's not only about languages. It's about a shared set of attitudes, values, goals, participation. So I'm not talking about just going out learning new language. I'm talking about going to the user groups, going to the conferences, you know, joining the mailing lists, looking at big code bases written in other languages, asking somebody, could you explain how this works to me? And I usually do this like three-monkey, like 3 things to take home from my presentations. So, candy, yeah. No, I think all the candy is 8. Not the salty ones. Not the salty ones, yeah, of course. The first thing is that you can actually learn things from strangers, right? There's a lot of things you can learn from other languages, other cultures, other people. They're not dangerous, they're not bitey. And you're an expert at social interaction. I trust you all to know if a person is dangerous or not before you talk to them. You can also change the way you interact with strangers. I've made you aware of your bias against strangers and languages and all that stuff, right? You know you have a prejudice against them. So next time you meet them, try erasing a border. Be the one that moves the border. Say, all right, so show me what cool stuff your language does. Show me how TypeScript works. You know, what can I do with this stuff? And the last thing is, come on, just don't be an asshole about things. It's so stupid. So don't go in and like criticize, condemn, and complain about things. You know, Chris Rock, the comedian, he says that, you know, it's not okay to joke about who they are, but it's okay to joke about what they do, right? And he's going into this whole stereotyping thing. And I think that applies a lot here, you know. it's not all those Ruby developers are all strange and different and weird, you know. But tell me what they do that is bad or good. 'Cause that's not nearly as offensive. So there's 10 more minutes. So thank you. And if you have any questions, yeah, this is me cuddling with tigers in Thailand. It's awesome. Yes.
With the whole being positive thing, what is left for Rob and I to do?
Yes, yes.
I feel like I'm a bit left out here.
Yeah, you are. Grow a positive attitude. Stop whining. I know. You're welcome. All right. 10 more minutes break. Oh, one more thing.
Are we done seeing the YMCA now?
Yeah. My shirt is here. If anyone wants to leave some comments or anything or sign it, or just please do. It would be awesome. Yes?
Can you count number of languages you know?
Well, it depends on what you mean of know, because there's languages I've learned and there's languages I maintain. Currently, I maintain C#, VB.NET, C++, Ruby, and I'm learning JavaScript, and I'm learning Clojure. So those are languages I'm maintaining. And then there's all the other languages which I've done stuff in, you know, but left. And I'm not there anymore. And yeah, I could count them, but that would be way too many. Because I started off programming when I was about 10, and I started with BASIC. I went to Turbo Pascal, I went to Delphi. I did VB something, can't remember. And so I've been all over the place and done loads of languages.
Logo?
I haven't done Logo. I've done Brainfuck though. So I spent a week learning Brainfuck really, really well, and I regret that decision. Thank you.